Good morning, everyone. Thank you, sir, for the very kind introduction. I'll start with a thank you and an apology. And the thank you, of course, to the organizers for this very kind opportunity to be part of this conference, and a very timely one that all of us will accept. The apology for missing what I understand was very important and engaging conversations on the first 2 days of this conference because of a prior conflicting commitment. And also apology for my voice. I have a very bad laryngitis, but hopefully I will kind of be successfully delivering the message that I start out to do here. So this is a very overarching conversation exploring interdisciplinary collaborations. And for this audience, and for me personally, who wanted to actually be a pediatrician, this is a reminder and a reality check that I go back to on a daily basis. This is from the UNICEF report, which really brings home the fact that we all really need to come together to work on this very important issue of the climate crisis and the nexus, because it has with not just health, but also with health systems. So this is from the UNICEF report, which brings home the fact that by 2050, every child on the earth, which is over 2 billion children, is forecast to face more frequent heat waves regardless of what we do. So not to discount that we have to come together to address this crisis, but this is to bring home the fact, what is the world that we are going to leave behind? And this statement, this is the coldest year of the rest of our children's lives, should bring home the importance of the work we do for climate change and health research, not just in India, but also globally. And therefore, working together to protect our children from the escalating impacts of heat waves and a changing climate is an urgent imperative. So this is probably the underlying imperative for all of us to work to address climate change. So what I will cover is what works for successful research. And the focus of this conference is climate change research, but what I will talk to you about is what really works for research across, and you can kind of relate it to climate change and health. And I will try to situate it with some examples from my own experience and the work from our team. I will also importantly talk about what did not work for us. I think because this will help us kind of understand together what we need to do to address those challenges and what can we do ahead for India. So what works for research? And like I said, please relate it to climate change and health research, because as I understand, everybody in this room probably is working on some aspects of the climate change problem. We need to have the right question and the right study design. We need to bring together the right team, have in our mind rigorous methodology and academic integrity right from the beginning, from the time of implementation to publication and dissemination. We must have stakeholder buy-in throughout. We need money to do the research. Financing pathways is very, very important. We also need to ensure political will to take up our findings. It's very good for researchers, hardcore researchers, to kind of do research, publish those findings, and continue in your career trajectory. But at the end of the day, we want our findings to translate into impact on the ground for India, and therefore political will is something we've got to ensure. How we do it is a very different story, but try. Timely and appropriate programs should come as a result of our translational work. And we must ensure that we are monitoring and evaluating right through, and ensure scale up. We might start small, but ensure that at the end of the day, there is some scope for scale up, because as we all know, India is known as countries within a country. We can't talk of one state, one district, because the problems even within one state are very different. Different climatic problems in every state. So most importantly, I think communication. And I want to reiterate that communication at several levels, within your team, within your organization, within the institution where you're institutions, and with stakeholders at every level. I think this rings true for all research that we do, and especially for climate change and health research, and I will show you why. So I will show you why through some examples of our work and our experiences. So we decided to address this question. What can we do to support heat health adaptation in India? And as you know, India is a country that is facing increasing onslaught of heat waves, not just in terms of the numbers of heat waves year after year, but also in terms of the duration of each heat wave and the intensity of the heat waves. Parts of a country which never had experienced heat at the intensity that they are experiencing now is something that we're all trying to digest. So we tried to address this question in our own way through a project. And we thought we will develop decision support systems for heat health adaptation at city level. Why city level? I think we were thinking because throughout the country today, there is a mandate for cities to develop heat adaptation plans. We're very fortunate we are in this city, in Ahmedabad, which actually put together the first heat adaptation plan for South Asia actually, and which became a template for many other city plans. But what we are hearing again and again from people who are evaluating these heat adaptation plans is many times it's kind of like a cut and paste job, which it cannot be because every city is different. So we need to kind of decentralize what we are doing and actually adapt at city level what we can do to heat. So this is what we started to do. And I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just to kind of bring home the fact again that this is true. Come 2100 or beyond, we are going to be in a very, very hot climatic situation. There's going to be a lot of things happening at city levels. We all have heard, I'm sure, in this audience about urban heat islands. The rampant growth and urbanization in every city is causing all these infrastructure to come in, and then we have closeted areas within cities. Green spaces are going away, and we have these urban heat islands. So what we were thinking, and then we have to take into account the urban growth that's happening. So what did we do? We thought about this issue, I already talked about it, that heat adaptation plans should become decentralized, become very, very city specific. And we have to think beyond just including temperature. For those who are working in the space, you know that temperature, humidity, day temperatures, night temperatures, all of these are very important parameters, and we need to take all of these into account when we develop our heat adaptation plans. We also need to take into account urban planning, which is happening at a very, very fast pace in all the tier 2 cities across the country. So what did we do? We got this funding, and this is where at every stage I bring to you the spirit of collaboration. We may not have had the capacity to do this alone. Thankfully for us, we got a technical partner from Europe, in Belgium, who had done this work for cities in Europe. We also got funding from the Flemish government. Now, financing for climate and health research is a problem at several levels. And there is, for those of you who follow the COP climate conference conversations, $100 billion from developed countries to go to developing countries every year. This pot of money was kind of from that pot of money in Belgium, from the Flemish government, was coming to India for a project. And we were fortunate to be the health partners and the India partners on this project. And the way we went about it, it's called Charisma. It's the Climate Health Risk Management Project. And we had an overall objective of developing a climate and health information dashboard for cities across India to use. We decided to focus on heat, but also, if possible, to focus on vector-borne diseases. Because, as we know, there is a very close link between changing climatic patterns and the changing patterns of vector-borne diseases. So we decided to focus on cities to develop a very robust city-specific adaptation tool which city-level administrators can use. Now, just start kind of connecting the dots. Finance from somewhere, we had a technical partner from outside of India, but they could not have delivered this project without support from India. So we were partnering with them, but even within India, we reached out to several different institutions and organizations. One of them is going to speak after me as well, Dr. Akash is here. So this is the Climate Health Information System, which was leveraging software that was developed in another country, which again meant we had to contextualize it for India. So right through, from the beginning, and this is a fact that I want to bring home to you, we kept co-creation as our buzzword. It is not about somebody coming from outside and developing something for India and saying, oh, this is it, pick it up and run with it. They talked to us, we talked to the stakeholders in India, and it was an idea of co-creation right through. The idea was developed with people in India. So this is what we set out to do. So across India, 50 cities, about 40 of them were part of already a national mission, the National Mission for Sustainable Habitats. We did a deep dive for 2 cities. The blue dots that you see there are Lucknow and Guwahati, for which we picked for certain reasons, also because we knew the stakeholders on the ground in these 2 cities. And we did an extensive deep dive in these blue cities. The yellow ones, a little less of a project, but we had the vision of scaling this experience, if it worked, to 48 more cities across India. So it is a GIS-based platform, so it meant several layers of data. And all of us know what it means to get data. Now, this is also going to be a recurring theme for me. When we want to do climate change and health research, we need data, and data at several levels. And here we're talking about city-level data. So we, right through, started with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. As you all know, they had the Smart City program, which had a big component of addressing climate in the cities. So we thought, okay, the NIUA, which is the National Institute of Urban Affairs, the technical support unit for MOHUA, was one stakeholder right away. Then we had our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's flagship National Program for Climate Change and Human Health, and NCDC, Dr. Akash Srivastava is here, also was apprised of this project. So right from the beginning, we had buy-in from the top level, so that at the end of the program, there will be an uptake of what we come up with. And of course, we talked to Ministry of Earth Sciences because this was climate, so Indian Meteorology Department, we wanted data from them. And at the city level, Lucknow and Guwahati, we did several meetings with the city level commissioners to make them understand this is something we are doing for you. So please work with us and we will give you a very contextualized platform for you to use in your heat adaptation plan. So what this looks like now is a dashboard that has several layers of data. I think you would have seen the figure, it's 4,000 layers of data using GIS tools. And it came from several sources. I've already mentioned the funding. So the prototype was developed in these two cities. And I'm just going to flip through the next two slides just to give you an idea of what kinds of data. It wasn't just data that we had to go and ask permission for. It was also a lot of the public data that is available in public domain. You know, the ERA5 data, which gives you a lot of the global climate data. We started with those. Vito is our technical partner, and they had in-house software that they had developed at a very fine resolution, 100-meter resolution. And we had land use data from global public domains. But we also, importantly, and this is one that I want to stress on, I talked about urban growth. And we all know that cities have master plans. And they go up to 2040, 2070 maybe in some cities. We were very fortunate because of our stakeholder engagement to get our hands on these master plans for Lucknow and Guwahati. It doesn't happen easily. So I think it took a lot of talking to the commissioners and telling them, we might come up with a product based on what we are seeing today, but if you have a vision for your city and you have a master plan, this is like their government document, but it was given to us to account for the growth of the city that they were planning. Where are they planning to put infrastructure? Where are they planning to plant trees? All of this information comes into the master plan. So we were able to actually include their plan as well in our software and come up with this, multi-variable input kind of vision and give them something at the end of the day which was very, very granular for their city. This is in the city of Lucknow, and I want to bring in another aspect. There was a capacity building component throughout. So we talked to, these are students from a city of planning and architecture in Lucknow who actually went around the city and kind of ground truth what we were doing through our modeling. So they went around the city of Lucknow, every street, documented every building, the building heights, vegetation, and kind of helped us ground truth what we were finding in our models. So a lot of capacity building on the ground, and some pictures there of stakeholder engagement in these two cities. So that's the city commissioner in the city of Lucknow. Sometimes we've had to go for meetings with them at 7 a.m., sometimes late in the evening, but whatever it takes, because it's so important to kind of have these people on board right through. And just a snapshot of what are all the different variables that city-level administrators could get access to if they went to this portal. So for Lucknow, we had a lot of different variables. What is the utility of something like this? So this is City of Lucknow's heat hotspot map. And having taken into account all their urban growth and master plans for the city, we were able to give them scenarios of where is this growth happening, where are the heat hotspots going to be because of your growth. And it's taken into account the master plans, and a number of different variables are accessible to them. What they could do, I will just give you some use cases. These dashboards have information overlaid, which includes things like population, census data, hospital positions, positions of healthcare facilities. So what can a city administrator, who normally also has at the city level a GIS specialist, what they can do is download whatever layers they want and overlay them. For example, you want to understand where are your heat hotspots. You can decide where you want to put your cooling areas. So Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan, people who are involved with that will know, one of the suggestions was put cooling areas, cooling spots, or places where you can have vulnerable populations take rest under shady areas. If I put on this map where are all your women and children concentrated, I could also say, make sure that they are close to the healthcare facilities. I mean, it's a thing that requires a lot of planning, but these are the different use cases that we showed them. You overlay different layers to come up with where is most of your vulnerable population and put your interventions in those places. So I just want to show you that this required engagement at multiple levels, collaboration at national level, but also down at the city level. And at the city level, not just the city commissioner, he would call all the health people, the health department, the urban development department, the students, everybody was in the room and they were together co-creating this product. And this is going into 2070. And very granular level, this is at ward level for Lucknow. They're going to know now where are the heat spots in the coming years. We did a similar thing for vector-borne diseases. So this I already mentioned, the use cases for such a prototype thing. And we were working on this 330, 300 kind of thing, trying to tell them, from every house you have to at least be able to see 3 trees. You should be seeing 30% tree cover in every neighborhood area. And everybody should be like 300 meters in proximity of an urban green space. Can we work on this principle going forward for your urban planning? A little bit about what we did for the vector-borne diseases, and here we were not too successful because we were not able to get the data. What we needed here was the current data in terms of we decided, okay, let's do dengue, the dengue outbreaks. For one city, we were able to get some data. For the other one, we were not successful. And I just want to say, what is the power of data? If we as researchers cannot access data, you cannot do this kind of work. So whoever is holding data sets, which are essentially supposed to be in public domain, should make it available, because the power of these kind of prototypes, which then can be translated into action on the ground, at city level, at state level, whatever that might be in the end. This is just an example. We were not able to get enough data for vector-borne diseases. We did try from National Vector-Borne Disease Control Program, and at state level, the Vector-Borne Disease Department. We were able to get a little data from Lucknow on dengue, and using that, we were able to map the hotspots for future dengue outbreaks in the city of Lucknow. So what we could do was, because we had weekly dengue outbreak data from Lucknow, mapped what happened in the city of Lucknow. And we mapped it with the climatic conditions as well, and we could see a story playing out over here. And we all talk about anecdotally, I think changing climatic conditions is changing patterns of vector-borne diseases, but here we could see the real story on the ground. And this was for 2022, and what we did was, we could see that there was some wards, some part of the city that were recurrent victims to the dengue outbreaks. So then you do a deep dive and see why this is happening. That is at the level of implementers on the ground. And what we could show them was, which are the major hotspots for dengue outbreaks. The message from here is, in a situation we are supposed to be a low middle income country, maybe we have limited resources, at a city level, the ward level planner can decide which wards do they need to focus on, where do they need to go and do the mosquito fogging, for example, and they can then, move their resources to these hotspots. So that is the utility of having a tool like this. And I think we tried to drive home the fact that this is something that will help you for decision making. So at the end of the day, we came to this decision support tool for city level planning. And the message also is this is very city specific. I said we started out with Lucknow and Guwahati, but if this is working for Lucknow and Guwahati, it can work for all other cities across the country. We have the knowledge, we've developed it, but what it requires now is uptake by the government. I think we were very fortunate that we had the national program people on board, but we also had the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs who took the software then to kind of integrate it in their smart city program and make it available to the cities. Of course, cities have to also say, we will put resources, we will give you the data, but here is an example of what can happen on the ground. There is knowledge that has been shared, there was political buy-in, there was buy-in from the nodal ministry, and hopefully this will get translated on the ground in the other cities. So that is one example, and I want to again reiterate the power of coming together. And I will share just one more example before my closing messages. And which I think you've already heard in other presentations from Dr. Prabhakaran yesterday and day before. This was 2016 when we made headlines, Delhi as a city. Smoke chokes Delhi, leaving residents cowering under air purifiers. 2016 for us living in Delhi was known as the airpocalypse year. It was the worst air pollution. For those who are familiar with Delhi, actually that is an aerial view of Connaught Place, completely covered with smog. And what we were fortunate enough to have was funding from NIH actually to host one of 7 hubs in the world called the GeoHealth Hubs. I will go through this quickly because it has already been present in this conference, but we focused on 2 cities, Delhi and Chennai, to build a model for exposure to air pollution. And people who are familiar with this space will know that there are many, many ways of measuring exposure to air pollution. There are monitors people put on the ground, are pollution control boards, but these monitors are very inequitably distributed. The entire country is not covered by monitors on the ground, which is a gap for us. Probably Delhi gets talked about a lot, capital city for air pollution as well, besides being capital city, because we have like 20 plus monitors in the city of Delhi. There are parts of India that do not have air pollution monitors. So this model was trying to close that gap, starting with the city of Delhi and Chennai, and we developed this spatio-temporal model at a very fine resolution of 1 square kilometers to measure exposure to particulate matter, PM 2.5, which impacts health at several levels. So this model actually took several points, data. I just want you to eyeball this. You've already seen this slide probably. But this is several variables. Pollutant data, satellite data, meteorological data, emission inventories, and also all land use data, brick kilns, fire counts, everything that matters for air pollution. So this model was developed for the city of Delhi and Chennai to start with, and we were able to build exposure profiles for the city from 2008 to, we're updating it to now, to current years as well. And a snapshot of the pollutant profile for the city of Delhi from 2008 to now, every day, every month, every year. And you can see the story it's telling. Winter months, really, really high pollutant profiles. But what I wanted to mention is the power of collaboration again. Collaborative, interdisciplinary research is key to achieving some of these outputs. We started with this GeoHealth Hub for Delhi and Chennai. We went on to get additional funding, thankfully, to scale up this effort across the country, from 2 cities to the entire country. So now we have this pollutant profile for the entire country. We have used this experience actually also to build a nationwide model for temperature, because we were trying to address the other climate change problem in India, which is heat. So, and I think we have been fortunate to expand also the outcome profile in terms of health outcomes. We are looking not just at adults, we started with looking at cardiovascular risk in adults, but we now have information across the life course because of collaboration with people who have pregnancy cohorts, who have, I'll skip through this is the same story of our growth, and this was growth due to collaboration. We did not stop short at only our level, but we decided to kind of work with different institutions, different people who could bring power to the knowledge that we were trying to put together. So we had a capacity building across the way. So Dr. Siddharth Mandal was trained in Harvard to come back and build this model for India. And this is the model that we built. And we have this nationwide model for PM 2.5. and similarly for temperature. So 2 models for the entire country. This is my colleague Ajit Rajiva, who actually built the model for India for temperature. And what we have been able to do now is fill some gaps in the evidence base for India. I think constantly every year in the upper houses of parliament, the question is asked, what is the evidence base in India? We have to move from the global burden of disease estimates. So here is homegrown evidence. It was a long journey, but we have gone stepwise, and today we are able to do a lot of analysis which is going to feed, hopefully, into programs and policies. So this was a 10-city study using a model to look at impact of heat waves on mortality. In the interest of time, I will not go into the details, but just to show that there were 3.6 million deaths in the across the 10 cities, and about 14.7% excess mortality due to heat waves. And again, I will skip these slides, but to say whatever definition of heat wave we took for India, this was a glaring fact, and this is coming from data in India. So there is no running away from this fact that it is happening, mortality and morbidity from heat waves. These are details about different cities. So every city is different in terms of number of heat waves, the intensity of heat waves, and you can see some very startling facts here. Cities like Shimla, who would think this is a hill station we all used to go to for holidays, and this is a city which is also facing heat waves as well as mortality. This was one of our study cities. And lastly, I want to come to the fact that, we talk a lot in silos. Climate change has different things: air pollution, heat waves, vector-borne diseases. We try to do research in verticals. We are a country that is prone to both air pollution as well as heat waves. Have we looked at the interaction between these two? And this is something that we have tried to do. This is unpublished data, but I just want to share this to show that from the fact that we got this kind of data, we were able to build this model, we have been able to bring these insights. What is the interaction between heat waves and mortality? For every 10 micrograms increase in PM 2.5, there is a change in temperature-related mortality, and vice versa. The next 2 slides actually show you those figures. Very, very startling. This is unpublished, but just to show that there is a problem here. We talk about air pollution in one set of stakeholders. We talk about heat with another set of stakeholders. There is an interaction at multiple levels happening, and it's affecting, it's causing mortality. So I just want to share this slide, which shows the growth in the evidence base the last few years from this work. We have analyzed across the board, and this all comes from an effort that started back in 2016. We brought in 2019 a group of people in the consortium. We called it the Chair India Consortium. It's a consortium for health and air pollution and climate-related research in India. And you will see in that picture many of the people who were probably in this conference over the last 2 days. We had representatives from IITs. We had representatives from people in the health research world, and we started talking to them in May of 2019, saying if we all work together, we can work wonders. I must say that a few people stayed with us, a few people did not, but nevertheless, this is a call for, I think, joint work, because it can make wonders. Thank you, sir. I will just close with this, and to say that teamwork is what works really, and what did not work is, I've said this right through data. Whether data is available, if it's available, is it accessible to researchers like us? And when it is accessible, is it really usable? So we need to talk at that level as well. We need to talk of collaborative research for larger public good. Do we have stakeholder buy-in? I don't know if people are ready to receive our findings. And it may be due to sensitivities, it may be due to denial, it may be due to conflicting priorities, but it also may be due to financing. And I'll close with this message. We are sitting in ICMR. I just hope ICMR will take up this area of work. I don't think we have seen any funding calls for climate change research. Please put this pitch for climate change research. Thank you, and I think I just want to close with communication and dissemination being a very important part of this work. Share your findings with all the stakeholders. It's a smart way to work. Thank you. Sorry if I've overstepped my limit here.